The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering Co-op Advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte.
Freshly rested and back from vacation.
Where we finally had time to hang out with people we haven't seen in a while.
And bring a bottle to share with the ones who imbibe.
Which is the whole spirit behind Come Over October, a recent initiative to help folks enjoy the time-honored tradition of a bottle of wine and what it engenders. Mary Dare of Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions chats with us about getting your indulging friends together to share and build traditions of your own.
And we'll also chat with folks from an organization that's just hit a major milestone. The Stavros Center for Independent Living turns 50 this year. And we'll chat with CEO Angelina Ramirez and Director of Development Jason Montgomery about this milestone and what's helped the center to reach it. But in Amherst, an astronomer is pondering big questions about global anxieties.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Well, we're back in the swing of things after a week off. And back at the kitchen table of Amherst astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed.
But a lot of things happened while you were away. Europa Clipper got launched.
Went off without a hitch.
SpaceX came back and its booster rocket and came back and it was caught in a proper way. Mm-hmm. And we had Northern Lights, which I remember calling you and go like, Monty, go out.
Go outside and see them now. That was right before we left, but then the comet.
And then the comet. So,
which I didn't get to see. I tried 3 times. I didn't get to see it. You had some beautiful photos from here in Amherst.
Just with the iPhone. I mean, you could see it last week. I think you can still see it in the evening skies, and now it's a little bit higher in the sky. I think part of the problem is the moon. So when the moon is not up, but bright. The moon is the problem.
Yeah, stupid moon.
Exactly. So the moon is the issue. Otherwise, you would have beautiful views. But maybe you can still try to find it. It is cool. It has a long tail, and it's now moving farther and farther away from the sun. So let's see how it goes.
I'll keep trying. A shout out to our engineer at NEPM, Chuck Dubé, who sent an email out to the whole staff about how to view the comet. And then ended it with, I'm not pretending to be Salman Hameed. I just wanted you to know. And I was like, that was very sweet. While we were away, he's stepping in to make sure everybody can see the comet. But we are talking about things that are way more depressing. Nothing starts out your back-to-work week like nuclear war and its connections to Western Massachusetts.
Right, and my apologies to you, Monty. Yeah. I know this is your first day back.
Yeah,
but
you sent me all these articles like, we're going to talk about nuclear war. I was like, oh, great. Quite the Monday.
But there were a couple of reasons I wanted to bring it up. First of all, I mean, I think from astronomy perspective, and when people talk about searching for life in the universe or intelligent life in the universe, there was this Drake equation that Frank Drake and Carl Sagan worked out back in the 1960s. And of course, 1960s, the nuclear threat, people were quite aware of that. And that threat remained on people's minds. And one of the variables in the Drake equation was called L. And L was the lifetime of a communicating civilization. So if you are looking for signals from extraterrestrial intelligence, one of the biggest factors, and that was one of their estimates in there, of course, the Drake equation is a total guess of how many communicating civilizations are out there in the universe. And so if you want to have a higher probability in that sense, you would like to have those civilizations live for a long period of time. And what they discovered was that this particular variable, L, was the lifetime of a communicating civilization. And because we only have one example, and that is us, to think about, one of their things was like, well, once we develop technology to communicate across interstellar distances, we also develop the technology to completely annihilate us because of the nuclear weapons. Of course, now there are other ways to go out too. For example, climate change and now the robots and all AI.
We keep coming up with new and better ways to destroy ourselves.
And that was one of their things that, well, if this is the path that most civilizations take. Now, from a sociology perspective, there are whole other issues with that, like, how much we can generalize from what one species on this planet do. Nevertheless, you can think of it in reverse, that maybe this is the path that these kind of intelligent species, when they develop the technology to communicate, also develop the technology to kill themselves. Mm-hmm. And hence, if we don't find anyone, it might be because, civilizations don't survive. And if we do find a signal, that would be a hopeful sign that technological civilizations can survive. So that was, a long way of saying that, no, we should not destroy ourselves.
Yes. And yet, we look like we're getting closer and closer. Although, we were a little bit closer to what seemed like a potential nuclear war with the situation in Russia and Ukraine. It has cooled a little bit over the course of the last year. But that whole atomic clock that scientists try to use to indicate the level of threat of potential nuclear annihilation has never been closer to midnight, I believe, than since, the Cuban Missile Crisis, perhaps. And there are many people in Western Massachusetts who are advocating for total nuclear disarmament globally and protesting therein. But let's talk about what some of the new developments have been in the world of nuclear technology in the United States in particular.
Well, so a couple of things. One is that the Nobel Peace Prize actually went to the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. And I think that is, again, that reminds us about the horrors of nuclear bombs. And it was poignant that they actually said that they were surprised that they got the Nobel Peace Prize and not the health workers in particular in Gaza, because they found sort of like some of the conditions that the people are experiencing in Gaza, that reminded them of some of the conditions 80 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's, again, that just reminds you about the horrors of wars in general. But on a larger scale, I think why I wanted to bring it up, and I know there are a lot of activists in the region, for example, Ira Health Fund, and there are...
He's a doctor in Northampton, physician. He's been part of 2 Nobel Peace Prize winning organizations, both of which have advocated, warning us about the dangers of nuclear war.
And there are other people who are also part of the ICAN, which is the, International Committee for the Abolishment of Nuclear Weapons. You also have Daniel Ellsberg papers, and Daniel Ellsberg himself, who was really against nuclear weapons. And
his papers are now at UMass Amherst, after he's the one who released the Pentagon Papers, which largely helped to end the Vietnam War.
So all of that said, there are the things that are happening in New England as well, was actually disclosed recently in an article in the New York Times. It was a front page article, I think 2 weeks ago, in which it talked about defense contractors giving talks in elementary schools across New England. And they were actually referring to mostly in Connecticut and Rhode Island, where you have a defense contractor that actually has been given a contract to build nuclear submarines. And submarines are the most important one because in the case of nuclear war, they cannot be targeted in a particular place, and then they can actually launch retaliatory or whatever nuclear weapons from it. And U.S., I think, right now has 14, but now they are building 12 more to refurbish them or whatever.
To update the technology, yes. The whole nuclear arsenal is going through a technological update.
And a couple of things that struck me. So this defense contractor was General Dynamics. And they have a contract, of course, from the U.S. Navy. But the fact that they are going into elementary schools, giving these talks in the hopes of inspiring some of these kids, that eventually they will work for them and get interested in submarines and, of course, nuclear submarines. To me, that was just shocking in some sense, because this reminded me, coming from South Asia, coming from Pakistan, or with the neighboring Afghanistan over there, you often hear these stories of indoctrination. Oh my goodness, and Taliban in Afghanistan are indoctrinating kids. Well, isn't this indoctrination in that sense? So to me, first of all, that was a little shocking from that perspective, but also the amount of money that U.S. is spending. So this money is already being planned for, $1.7 trillion to upgrade U.S. nuclear arsenal over 30 years. And this goes back to this larger question that on the one hand, we keep on talking about, the abolishment of nuclear weapons. And there have been Nobel Prizes being given for these efforts, but we are going in the opposite direction. New York Times, again, there can be a lot of criticism of New York Times, but I think they have been doing a good job. They had a special issue called At the Brink that was in March of 2024, and that was precisely the point that people have actually forgotten how scary nuclear weapons or nuclear wars can be, and rather instead we are actually going in the opposite direction. In this particular case, $1.7 trillion over 30 years. And in the article, actually, they helpfully calculated, that it is about $108,000 per minute for 30 years. And not for social services, not for building hospitals, not for can we reduce inequity. No, $108,000 per minute we are going to be spending
For 30 years.
For 30 years for building weapons that can destroy the entire world. Again, just juxtaposition of that, because my son goes to Amherst school system and Crocker Elementary School, and they are having budget cuts, for example, and they are having trouble figuring out what to do with the education, and so they have a $2 million budget shortfall for next year, and they are figuring out what to do for the Amherst school system, Amherst Pelham. And I was thinking, hey, that's 20 minutes. In 20 minutes of this budget, you can actually really solve the problem of Amherst Pelham schools, and that is related to the school system for which these defense contractors are going to give lectures to recruit them in the New England area.
I'll also say another local tie-in. For a long time, an organization called the National Priorities Project, which has merged with another larger organization, was based in Northampton. It included, as its director for a time, now State Senator Joe Comerford. Their job was to crunch the federal budget, just to show you how these exact types of numbers, $108,000 a minute for 30 years, to totally revitalize the U.S. nuclear arsenal. And what are our priorities? That's why they called it the National Priorities Project. Is our priority to revitalize the nuclear arsenal at this extraordinary fee, or is it to figure out ways to support the Amherst school system and other school systems across the country?
And again, how do we think about these things? I mean, again, these numbers seem big, but even within the nuclear perspective, that the Manhattan Project over the course of World War II was about $30 billion inflation adjusted. So in today's dollars, it would be $30 billion. This upgrade of nuclear weapons program, that is about twice that per year. Twice that of the Manhattan Project, which we considered as this big thing. So I think the reason why I wanted to bring it up, partly because of the Nobel Peace Prize that was given, but also I think people have forgotten how scary nuclear war can be. There have been interviews with the survivors talking about that they saw people carrying eyeballs, for example, before collapsing to the ground. They were burned, and so those type of things, of course, The Day After, which was a movie in the 1980s, which became a big hit at the time and really scared people. And I think that's the type of thing which we need to come back, because this is happening. And again, what's happening in the rest of the world? Of course, there are other nuclear countries as well. There are 12,000 right now nuclear bombs or nuclear warheads in the world. Well, that's a huge number. Obviously, one is more than enough, but there are 12,000. Yes, Russia has those, China has those, and China has about 400. US and Russia has, I think, close to around over 3,500 nuclear weapons. Pakistan, where I'm from, Pakistan, I think, has over 150. India has over 150. Israel has those. North Korea, and of course UK, France. Just for the heck of it, they're just keeping them So yes, there are all of those things, but we are here in the US. And this 1.7, you have to imagine, well, they are doing something. Well, sure, whatever they might be doing, the question is, what are we doing? And we are spending $108,000 per minute on building up upgrading our nuclear program. And this is not something that is fictional. Just 2 weeks ago, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which was where the Manhattan Project was based, and if you watched Oppenheimer,
yeah.
I mean, that's where it was. They have just started up a program to produce what are called the first plutonium pits. Again, they had stopped producing those. That's the central component, the sort of like bowling ball size key component that goes into the nuclear weapons. They have started producing that right now. Their goal is to produce 30 pits. These are plutonium pits. 30 pits per year with an additional 50. So that will make it 80 pits per year by the mid-2030s. Goes back to this question, how many nuclear bombs do we need? They will be producing 80 by the end of 2030, 80 plutonium pits. It's not just about the warheads just about nuclear weapons itself, but also the environmental issues, because the places that these are produced, it also causes environmental damage. It also produces radiation issues for the local population. There have been cases before. There have been protests. In some places, the courts have stepped in to stop these type of things, but not in Los Alamos. This was the news item that came up just 2 weeks ago.
I'll also say, just last month, there was a great story in the Daily Hampshire Gazette, our local newspaper, about demilitarized Western Mass and the protests that have been ongoing at L3 Harris in Northampton, which, if you didn't know, is a place where components for nuclear submarines are being created right here in the peace-loving Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts. And I will also highly recommend the digital versions of the articles that you sent to me, Salman, by W.J. Hennigan from the New York Times. The way that they are crafted in an interactive sense, I'm not a big fan of reading news articles on my phone, frankly, but I did it. And the way that it takes you through how graphic the devastation would be, even with a small-scale nuclear war, the famine that would be created across the globe, that would translate into the sheer numbers of millions of people who would starve to death with a small-scale nuclear war. A lot of people like to say, if India and Pakistan were to launch against each other, being so close neighbors, even 100 nuclear warheads, there would be millions, if not billions, of people who would be either directly affected or die.
And the bigger threat is more tactical nuclear weapons, which Russia threatened recently to use if they start to lose the war. And that was actually a scenario at one point that if the Ukrainian forces had broken through to Crimea, then they might have used these tactical nuclear weapons that are smaller in size than the city-destroyed one. And in the New York Times interactive one, that is precisely that point, that it is time to really imagine. We haven't really imagined what it would look like. And the scenario that they portrayed, which I think is very effective, is a nuclear bomb that is about half the size of the one that was dropped on Hiroshima. And what would follow? What would happen within the blast zone? What would happen to people who are a little bit farther away? What would happen in the long term? And it's horrific. If you look at those things and then connect that to the fact that we have people coming in and talking to elementary school kids about nuclear submarines, or you have our own local companies in this area producing components for that, you have to put those two things together, and it really brings back to this insanity. For what? And so you spend this $108,000 a minute, but you are not doing that for this wonderful thing about the Europa Clipper mission that went, and you go like, look what humans are capable of, So you're not putting $100,000 per minute for something that we can be proud of as humans. We are producing this, what we are trying to do, it has the ability to end humanity. And we hope that doesn't happen, but we certainly have the means to do it.
Well, it is spooky season, and it's Halloween's right around the corner, so if you were looking for some horror for your Monday afternoon, now you have it.
I mean, I feel like nobody has to look that far for horror.
Nope.
But perhaps we can imagine a future where the threat of nuclear war is but a distant memory.
And perhaps we can imagine a leader who would help us chart that course.
Tomorrow on the show, we'll share some of your ideas about which fictional character might just be the leader we need in times like these.
And it's not too late to share your idea for which character from fiction would make for the best president. Send us an email, or better yet, a voice memo. And folks, you can do it on your smartphone. You can push the thing, you can make a recording, it sounds good, and then you email it right from there. You don't have to call a phone number. We got a lot of voicemails on our Zoom.
Like, it works either way.
It works either way.
We're happy to take them either way.
Either way. thefab413@nepm.org is our email.
On the way, we'll celebrate the Stavros Center for Independent Living and its milestone of half a century helping folks in the disabled and deaf communities develop the tools and skills they need to take charge of their own lives.
But first, catching up with our friend Mary Dare of Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox and the convivial campaign of Come Over October.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Greenfield Savings Bank, providing residential lending advice for homeowners looking to refinance or start home improvements. GSB's residential lenders are here to help navigate all lending options. Find more information at greenfieldsavings.com or at 413-775-8200. Greenfield Savings Bank, member FDIC, DIF, equal housing lender, NMLS 409187.
Last year, we went basically straight from the summer through the March, and this year, trying to break it down just a little bit.
The March for the Food Bank, which happens in November.
March. Oh, the March. I thought you were talking about through March. The month.
No. We went basically from August to Christmas, with no real, break.
Glad I could help you guys ease back.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Days of wine and roses.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Mary Dare, we love to come over to your shop in Lenox, and we wanted you to come over to our studio where we are in Springfield, but neither of us could make it, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean it's going to stop us from attempting to invite friends over for Come Over October. What is Come Over October, Mary Dare from Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox?
Hi, guys. So happy to be here talking about this brand new. This is a 2024 debut of this initiative by a woman named Karen McNeil and a couple of her colleagues. Karen is best known for her book, The Wine Bible.
Oh, yes.
She's been working in wine journalism for decades, and so she's a really prominent figure in the wine industry. And this is her brainchild. It's called Come Over October, and it's an initiative that has a very simple goal. It's encouraging people to come together, to invite a friend, a colleague, neighbor, family member to come over to your house, your apartment, your yard for a glass of wine during the month of October.
I'm for this.
Me
Right?
too.
I feel like I'm an easy sell in this case, though, because I like my friends and I like sharing wine with them.
We've institutionalized wine drinking once a week at least on the show. So, this is something that's right up, right in our alley.
And that's something, she highlights in the presentation of it is us wine lovers, people who make their livelihoods around this wine industry. It's something we do all the time, but we want to really highlight it to, the greater community of just the need, I think more than ever, especially now with our political and world climate, the need to come together, to connect and to share ideas, and sort of having an emphasis on that through this initiative, for a month-long initiative that, of course, can be done and should be done any time of the year. We'll talk a little bit more about why she chose this month in particular.
Let's talk about it now. I'm Mary Dare from Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions. It's called Come Over October, and we're winding down October here, so emphasis on the wine. Tell us why she chose October.
I think it rhymes better.
Come Over
It
October.
rhymes. Number one, right? We've got dry January.
Doesn't rhyme.
No, but what are these other months that there's acronyms and such for, little slogans?
November, right? When people don't shave.
Right. She kind of did the rhyming with October. But earlier this year, and this is where it kind of is timely, in the past year or so, there's been a lot of really negative, downer news about the wine industry, about wine sales, the negative effects of wine on health. The World Health Organization going as far as saying that no amount of wine or no amount of alcohol is safe, and really sort of pinpointing wine in particular. So not even just saying that it's not healthy, but saying that no amount is safe. And so the World Health Organization, along with many others, the New York Times, there's just article after article kind of poo-pooing the wine industry. And she, as a wine professional and wine lover, just was getting sick of hearing all of the negative conversation about alcohol and the narratives around wine. So she decided to do something about it. So earlier this year, around, I think she was saying the month of March, she just finally said, you know what? I have a voice in this industry. She's really built up her reputation and recognition. So she decided to use that position to make a statement. And so rather than just writing a single article that could be published and that's good, she decided to do something that was more interactive and that could get people really fired up and something that people can kind of get behind and relate to. So she created Come Over October as a movement to do just that.
And I think if you look at wine in its history and its import in culture and culinary traditions.
And honestly, survival, too. Like, there are definitely points in history where, like, wine, beer, and cider were the things that you could drink that were safe because it wasn't water.
Right.
Exactly. Middle Ages, like the medieval times, for sure. And that's really where she wants to separate the conversation about alcohol, which wine, even though it falls under the category of alcohol, is so much more than that. And it's really, like we're saying, it's like threaded into that rich tapestry of culture, religion, art, and emotion. And she's really leaning into that side of things, the emotion when it comes to having a glass of wine, the connection that we have. Like, you could sit down next to a stranger, never met that person in your life. You share a glass of wine, if it's at some event or wherever it could be, at a random restaurant or bar. And once that glass of wine is finished, like, you're no longer strangers. You've shared something. You've kind of opened up the conversation, ideas. And that just really strikes a chord with us, because this is why we've chosen the wine industry to be our way of life, because we just feel that how special it is, its unique ability to be so much more than a delicious thing to drink. It's really evokes so much of that, the emotional, the connection you can have, or thinking of who you've shared a bottle of wine with, the setting. It goes so much further than just a beverage.
I also love about this, like, the general colloquial nature of it, to demystify wine for those friends of yours who they don't necessarily know enough either about their palate or about wine in general and have shied away from it. This is your opportunity to take those friends that drink and be like, no, it's not this far off thing. It is literally right here. It's very tangible and it's very accessible.
Exactly. And just that, the enjoyment that comes from doing just that, like you're saying, Kelly, it's like bringing friends together and just opening up something that's delicious. Or maybe it's a bottle that's like your tradition that you have every time you get together, or totally new discovery. That's where wine is also just so fun, because you can go in so many directions and have so many different associations with it.
In spirit of this event, I actually did this last week. Literally did this as the founding for me, hanging out with some of my friends in our time off, where I was just sort of like, I have all of this extra wine because my partner has stopped drinking, but I am not going to stop collecting bottles of wine. But now I have other people to drink them with. I just have to be like, hey, I'm coming over and I have these 2 bottles.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I did it just a couple weeks ago when everybody could see the Aurora Borealis. We were like hoping to see it once again late at night, and we had a campfire in my friend's backyard and, got to drinking some good stuff and chatting and talking, and that's what it's all about. And we're speaking with Mary Dare of Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox about Come Over October, which is encouraging people to commune with one another over a glass of wine, despite what is probably scientifically, there is some there about the dangers of alcohol. We'll put that out there. And we know that there are a lot of listeners who have had problems with alcohol in the past or teetotal now for one reason or another. And we see you and recognize you and acknowledge you. At the same time, we see and recognize and acknowledge how important it can be to commune with one another over wine or what have you. Mm-hmm. And I can think of so many incredible memories I've had throughout my life where wine was a pivotal piece of it. I used to have there was a BYOB restaurant, which is still there, but it's no longer BYOB, local burger in Northampton. And I, every Wednesday would share a bottle of wine with my good friend Brian, the wine squirrel, I would call him. And it was such a wonderful thing to look forward to week after week. I think of the time that our friend Khalees, Bill Childs, left the city of Florence, Northampton, and moved to Austin, Texas. All of his glassware was in boxes. He found 2 Mayor Claire Higgins Hot Chocolate Run for Safe Passage mugs, and we drank a bottle of Veuve Clicquot out of 2 ceramic mugs. And I still can bring back the memory of that Veuve Clicquot out of those mugs in my memory at any time. So you're making these important moments with folks. Be responsible, be safe. If you have a problem with it, we're not forcing you to do this.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, Monty, it's just it's kind of where it can take you. That's what's so special about wine, I think, is not only, the taste memory, but just brings you back to who you were with. And that's it's a fun aspect of this beverage. And I just wanted to mention quick too, like the actual packaging of wine being in a bottle, like it's made to be a communal beverage. It's a communal package, essentially, at its essence. And I think that's just what lends to that aspect of sharing.
Oh, for sure.
Mary Dare, I mentioned a very pivotal memory for me about a bottle of wine. Can you think of one for you that's like you go back to that in your memory as an important thing in your life?
Yes. So it's actually like the crux of what led us to create our retail shop is when we lived in France. We were living in this little village at the foothills of the French Alps. So wild, like this village was built into the side of a cliff. We were working crazy days. Our friend just opened a restaurant. We were helping him with all of the, Ben was in the kitchen. I was the dishwasher, just wild, full days of work. And we would have one day off a week. And with our friends, we would sit on these super steep, the stoop outside of our apartment on these wildly steep streets. We'd have a bottle of rosé. We'd have like a roast chicken, some sort of a grain salad, and just cheese and bread. And would have these perfect picnics just thrown together. But we looked forward to it all week long. And it was being able to slow down, be together, and just drink and eat really good things. And that was kind of what inspired us years later we worked towards what we are able to do now is fill our shelves with bottles from around the world and be able to share, that specialness in a way with our customers and hopefully help them to have those wonderful experiences too. Yeah. Whether it's, in a village in France or in your backyard or camping, wherever it could be. That's what's, wine, it's in all situations. It makes moments, extra special.
Honoring those memories and engendering them to make more. We did this during the pandemic, actually, I realized. That was our Sundays. We would get tacos from Neff.
Our friend Neftali Duran.
Who was doing tacos at Belly of the Beast at the time.
Yep.
And during the week, I would pick up bottles from Provisions, and we would play board games all Sunday and eat tacos. And that was our Sunday during the first, few years of the pandemic.
It is not lost on me, too, that communion in many religious traditions involves wine. And that Jesus' first miracle was making sure that there was enough wine for the rest of a wedding at the request of his mother, who's happened to be named Mary, like our very own Mary Dare.
It has a big, big role in exactly like we were saying, just in culture, in religion, in art, in history. And just that emotional aspect of it that really hits that emotional nerve with people and emphasizes just friendship, being together, connecting now more than ever. Yeah. It's timely.
Yes, for sure. And again, that history, it's worldwide. You see it, in Africa, you see it in, literally everywhere. There is some fermented beverage and there is communion around it, which is kind of a beautiful thing to just, notice in all humans coming together.
It is called Come Over October. It's created by the wine journalist Karen McNeil, who is behind the Wine Bible, amongst other wine journalism. And it is being right now touted by our favorite Berkshire County wine friend, Mary Dare at Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions with Ben Dare somewhere back there, making sure the shop.
And there's a pile of information on their website at comeoveroctober.com. Information, if you're intimidated at all about hosting or having a get together like this, they've got tips and tricks and history and a whole lot of other things for you to peruse and gain a little bit of confidence in doing this. Not that you should need confidence to hang out with your friends, but
Right.
And more so too that it just boils down to just have friends over. Just get together, be with people that you want to spend time with, or meet new people and have those conversations and share ideas. And why not do it over a bottle of wine?
Well, we can't wait to come over again to Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox, Mary Dare. And thanks for telling us all about Come Over October.
My pleasure. Thanks for letting us share a little bit of something that we're super excited about. It's always great to hang out with you guys.
And now it's time to celebrate with the Stavros Center.
It's their 50th birthday, and we'll chat with Angelina Ramirez and Jason Montgomery about the organization's history, what may lie ahead for its future, and how you can celebrate both this Thursday at their gala.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. The Stavros Center for Independent Living is turning 50. It's been 5 decades of growth and change since that first group of activists began this journey in a farmhouse in Amherst. The Stavros Center has been an instrumental organization helping to usher legislative changes in the Bay State and supporting disabled and deaf folks to establish more autonomy in their own lives and their greater communities.
Joining us to speak about the organization's history, mission, and the Sold Out Gala celebrating their half a century this Thursday at the Log Cabin in Holyoke, our CEO Angelina Ramirez, and friend of the show and Director of Development for Stavros, Jason Montgomery. Maybe we should coax a text poem out of you at some point later in the show, which is...
Please do, and give the shout out again, because I want to confusingly look at my phone as I start getting tons of texts.
We prefer to give your text poetry phone number out when you're not here and don't know it, so that you get bombarded with requests for poetry all of a sudden out of nowhere. But we'll get to that in a little bit. We're here to talk about Stavros and the Stavros Center for Independent Living and a half a century of that great organization. Angelina, tell us about your history with Stavros.
Well, I started Stavros over 30 years ago as a secretary, helping people just log in and say hello and do, help them with whatever they needed. And then over the years, I have been climbing the ladder, so to speak, or sideways, or, well, kind of like the ramp, because we don't have ladders at Stavros.
Yeah. Stavros is famous for your ramps.
Exactly. And now I'm the CEO at Stavros, and over the years, one of the things that I'm most proud of that I have done through that time there is assistive technology. Stavros is a pioneer on assistive technology when most people didn't even know what that was. And we wrote amazing papers on how to use assistive technology for people in mental health back in the 1990s, when nobody was thinking that was possible. And we did a lot of different stuff during that time.
What are some of the things in the 1990s that what was the technology?
We had a fax.
I didn't have any technology. Fax, exactly, things like that.
Well, one of the things that is funny, I always joke around, is that we had our first computer in the 1990s, and it was an Apple, and we had to write a grant for it, and we had to take turns. But one of the things that we used to do is help people throw a lot of cables around so that people can open and close doors using their voice. And now you can do that with Siri.
Wow. That's amazing to see that transformation from, like a connected household, and how that adapts for people who need to rely on that technology versus the cool and innovative stuff you're doing in the 90s with ropes.
Exactly. Pretty much, yeah.
It makes it sound like Rube Goldberg machines.
I know. Kind of fun.
I mean, but probably was. Like, what's changed in the legislation over these past 30 years that you've seen?
Well, oh my goodness. First of all, Stavros started in 1974, and in 1973 was the Rehab Act that allows us to start. And so that opened up the doors from a medical view of the world for people with disabilities to person-centered kind of work, where people can make their own choices and be assisted by people with lived experience, which is what we call now peer advocates, to do that work. So in terms of legislation, Amherst downtown have their first ramps in the 1980s. Their sidewalks that you now are looking at with all the cars, the
curb
strollers, the curb cuts could go in, and that wasn't a thing back in the 70s. One of the things that for legislation that we did was Olmstead. Basically, that protects people that want to live in the community to stay in the community. And over the years, we have brought about, if we haven't sued you yet, we will sue you. It's the attitude that some people have at Stavros. Because if you're not providing, if you're not allowing people with disabilities to lead their own lives, then you are on our way of progress.
Which is tons of fun for raising money from businesses.
Is it? Yeah. Let's turn to Jason Montgomery, who is the Director of Development for the Stavros Center for Independent Living, which celebrates 50 years with a big celebration at the Log Cabin on Thursday. Tell us about that, about how supportive is the business community, because it is very costly to try to get your buildings up to ADA, and yet it's a very, very important thing to try to be working towards.
Surprisingly supportive. Like, I mean, we joke that if we haven't sued you yet, like, keep an eye out. But the business community has been very supportive of our mission. There's some particular partners like USA Medical Supply who have been amazing with the work that they've been doing, not just through their financial donations, but their in-kind donations with our Home Sweet Home program. There's People's Bank, Greenfield Savings Bank, just to name a few of the sponsors that really have stepped up to help us generate the capital that we need to be able to do this work. Because, you know, Angelina probably won't be the first to tell you that oftentimes the contracts that really keep the business moving don't actually support enough of the work that we do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so we really have to find ways in the community to raise additional funds to be able to get the work done. Home Sweet Home being a prime example. You know, we can find money to build ramps, and our Home Sweet Home is our ramp and home modification building program, but it never covers it all, and it never covers enough of the need that's out in the community. So.
And the same is true with batteries. Like, we loan out wheelchairs, and those wheelchairs need batteries. And those batteries are $500 a piece. And if we don't have people that donate that or donate the batteries, we are in big trouble because we cannot provide them out to the community.
Yep. Jason, what got you involved with the Stavros Center?
Angelina gave me a job.
Oh, wait.
No.
He doesn't live by poetry alone.
No one lives by poetry alone.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
Yeah. Disability is close to my heart. For those who do know, both of my children have neurodivergency and disability. I came to the organization from a background with individuals in my family who were disabled. My grandfather had osteomyelitis and actually had a limb difference, and so he was always kind of such a role model for me. And then I got there and they were like, oh yeah, by the way, you're disabled too. And I was like, oh no, you really? I didn't know that. And then it all kind of lined up and made sense.
I know that we've said that Stavros is famous for their ramps. We've talked about the Home Sweet Home thing, but it is interesting to hear about the different types of disabilities that Stavros has been working with. I know you were founded by folks with spinal cord injuries, our friend Christos Palamas, who will be on the show later this week. We're going to roll through his exhibit at the Anchor House of Artists in Northampton to continue the celebration of Stavros. And if somebody is in a wheelchair, it can be clear to everyone that they have some form of disability and may need some form of accommodation. There are lots of disabilities that are not as visible as that.
Right.
How has Stavros transformed over these 50 years to help accommodate folks with those types of disabilities?
And perhaps give them a little bit more visibility in the greater community so that more people are aware of how pervasive is the wrong word, but like how much wider the disabled community really is.
Well, from the beginning, and Chris will tell you that part of the first people that we were serving are people that came from Belchertown State Hospital, and some of them people had mental health disabilities. And through the years, we have helped people, like, and prime example is right now we have a grant from Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation to provide things that will help you not need a therapist. If you remember back in COVID years, therapies were not to be found. You had to wait for a long time, and we couldn't have people just end up in crisis while they were waiting. Mm-hmm. So we use a model that was created, I forgot by the WHO.
Yeah,
by the WHO, by the World Health Organization.
Oh, not the band.
Not the band. And we help, through the contract with monies from Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation, we have been able to train people to help people do things that will help them not get into crisis, like focus therapy or like breathing exercises or writing skills, whatever it is. We also have been over the years, for example, I mentioned earlier the assistive technology. We were one of the first people to talk about, okay, so what could be assistive technology for someone who is a chain smoker because of the mental health issues that they have. And we were working with some of the people to provide them ashtrays that were weighted and helping them fire and smoke detectors alarms for people who were deaf that were chain smokers. So all those that were visual that people could see. So, I mean, over the years, we have done a number of different things to help people with mental health live in the community and thrive.
And one of the things that I think really was brought home to me when I came to Stavros was that on a long enough timeline, we're all disabled. Like on a long enough timeline, everyone's body is going to go through changes and inevitably going to meet some status of disability. And disability can take on so many different forms, whether it's incredibly visual, like a wheelchair user, or invisible.
I like that.
Invisible.
It worked, and we understood.
Yeah. Like certain mental health disabilities. And I think that Stavros steps up to ensure that all of those rights are protected.
Like, we talk about mental health, but we also talk about Crohn's, for example. People don't see you, and you need a lot of breaks sometimes when you're in crisis. So there's a lot of different disabilities that fall under this. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day telling me, a physical disability takes her 3 hours in the morning to get ready to go to work. It takes me sometimes an hour because I have to do my treatment for my asthma. And so different people have different disabilities and different things that they need. And the crux of this, of us at Stavros, is helping people figure that out and giving them the peer support that they need to live in the community and be healthy and do the best that they can.
We're talking with the folks behind the Stavros Center, which started out in Amherst, Massachusetts. They're celebrating 50 years this week. We're speaking with the CEO, Angelina Ramirez, as well as the Director of Development, Jason Montgomery. We'll take a little break and talk more about Stavros coming up in just a little bit.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are here with the CEO of the Stavros Center for Independent Living, Angelina Ramirez, as well as the Director of Development, Jason Montgomery. Stavros celebrates 50 years, based in Amherst originally, but now with places in Springfield and Greenfield that are helping folks in the Bay State not only live independently, but advocate for how to be more independent wherever they go. What are some of the next horizons that Stavros wants to try to crest with
in its next 50 years?
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the work that I know Chris did and other folks from Stavros really helped to develop a lot of the legislation in this state to make accommodations necessary, so that if you get a strongly worded letter with Stavros letterhead on it, you're going to get sued if they don't if you don't up your game. What's the next?
And simultaneously, like, technology is advancing in this field too at just an exponential rate. So there's a lot that's possible as well.
Yeah, a good example of that is, all those companies that are called so-called disruptors like Lyft and Uber. Those are not accessible vehicles. So one of the things that we are working on with some other advocates in the state, and how do we make that sure that there's accessibility and transportation? Because the law says there should be accessibility, but does these people fall under the law or don't they? So some of it is looking at what is it. One of the things about Stavros is that we are consumer driven. A lot of the issues that we take on is because someone called us up and say, this isn't working, and we need your help to figure this out. And it could be anything from, if I remember back in the 70s and in the 90s when I first started doing this work, there were barely any parking spots for people with disabilities, and now there is whatever percentage that it needs to be in most places. So, I mean, that is part of it, is consumers have to tell us what they need, and we will go for it. As a matter of fact, we're having 3 open houses on November
4th, November 7th, and November 15th. We'll be holding open houses at our Springfield, Amherst, and the Greenfield Public Library. Part of this will be to share our new strategic plan, which will help guide us into the next 50 years. And another part is just to celebrate some more. I mean, 50 years is a huge milestone.
Yeah.
So we want all of our consumers to be able to take part part in that celebration.
And to tell us where do they want to go next. Yeah.
And so is this for people, these open houses, to learn about how they can make their own houses, their own apartment buildings more accessible? Or who are these open houses for, and what should they be coming for?
It could be for anybody in the community, consumers in particular, who want to tell us what is it that they want to do next. Sometimes that will be people that own their own homes and they want to be visited by people with disabilities. Sometimes it will be people that just want to tell us, okay, this isn't working. The housing market isn't working for us. I mean, we were just talking about someone earlier today who it has taken us 2 years to get back in the community from a nursing home. And how do you do that when there's nothing available? So, working on other organizations to help them develop housing that is accessible for all.
Yeah. And so much of the work is consumer driven. It's driven by what the community of people living with disabilities needs. And so the open houses are their chance to come and share with us and for us to hear, like, one-on-one, what do you need? What do you see the next 50 years being like? And what do you see as being a priority? So
that is so great. And that is Jason Montgomery, is the Director of Development for Stavros Center for Independent Living, who celebrates their 50th anniversary this week at the Log Cabin. You're going to that, right, Khalees?
I am going at that. I'm
lucky because it's sold out.
Yes.
We've also been joined by CEO Angelina Ramirez. And as I mentioned, we will be talking with one of the founders of Stavros later this week, Chris Palamas, at his art exhibit at Anchor House of Artists in Northampton. But before we go, Jason Montgomery, who is from 50 Arrow Gallery and is a poet.
Yes.
You have a poet text line. What is the text number to get a
poem? To get a poem
from Jason Montgomery.
It is 413. Buy myself some time.
It's a fabulous 413.
Actually, sorry, it's now 442. 336-7636.
442.
336-7636.
Okay.
I had to change the number.
Because too many calls.
Yeah, for privacy reasons.
442-336-7636. You'll get a poem from Jason Montgomery.
Yes, you will.
Thank you so much. Tomorrow on the Fabulous 413, we're confronting the nation's legacy of slavery with someone whose family played a huge part in that legacy, author Tom DeWolf. He's coming to speak in Springfield for the Healing Racism Institute, and they will join us tomorrow on the show.
Plus, we're going to head to Rice Fruit Farm in Wilbraham to hear how proprietor Anthony Maloney handles apples, and ice cream, and more. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte. We'll see you tomorrow.